this is what's needed, right?
Yeah,
and what I want you to do, bro, is to really curse on knowledge. We know what it's all about.
Sure.
Really break it down, inshallah, for the viewers,
Okay.
bro. Like, no God, no good. What's the play? Is it a play on words? What does this mean?
It is. It actually. See, the unique thing about the campaign "No God, No Good," it's a play on the phonetics and it's a play on the meaning. So what we're saying is, if you know Allah, if you know God, you will know what good is. And if there is no God, there's no good. And why is that the case? Well, it's very simple. Because first and foremost, from the Islamic tradition point of view, the highest form of good is worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yes.
And all other goods come from that.
Mm.
And therefore, if you know Allah, you will increase your knowledge of Him and your love for Him and your kind of, how can I put it? Your passion and your energy to want to worship Him. And the other thing I want to mention is if you understand the concept of goodness, the idea of goodness, brothers and sisters, can only really exist if God exists.
Mm.
Because if I said to you, bro, just imagine one day you come home from work and you basically flick through the television channels and you see this crazy headline: 5-year-old beheaded by madman. What would happen inside you?
You'll get angry. You'll think it's wrong. It's disgusting. It's nasty. Why would someone do this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's wrong. It's disgusting. You are,
Probably switch the TV off.
of course, you are
You can't do anything
appalled,
about it, yeah.
disgusted, abhorrent. So if I ask you, is that action that you've just read on the news channel, is it morally wrong? What would you say?
Absolutely. That's not even a question.
So you would say it's morally
I
wrong.
would say every single person watching this right now, whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, they would say it's absolutely morally wrong in every way, shape, or
Okay,
form.
good. Let me ask you another question. Is it objectively morally wrong?
Absolutely. It's wrong in every sense. It's just wrong.
Good. Now this is where it gets a bit tricky.
Okay.
Because if there is no God, no Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then how can you provide a foundation for objective morality?
So let me think about what you're saying. So what you're saying is, we weren't talking about God right now. I just saw this headline and I know it's wrong in every sense. Like
Absolutely.
every single other sane human being would say,
Yes.
it's wrong. But what you're saying is, if you deny Allah, God doesn't exist, then you can't say it's absolutely wrong because you don't have a standard for absolute wrong or right. Or,
In a way.
okay.
Let me explain what I mean by objective here. Objective means that it's outside of your limited mind, bro, and outside of your limited emotions. Okay?
Right, okay.
It's not based on the human limited mind
Personal opinion.
and personal opinions or subjective feelings.
Right.
It's outside, so to speak. So if this moral is outside, then what is its source? What is its nature?
Wow.
Where did it come from? What grounds this morality, right? Now, I would argue, and many would argue, that the only thing that can ground this moral thing, right, is God Himself. Why? Because God is outside of the universe. He is not subjective. He transcends. He is unique. He's not subjective like human beings. He transcends human subjectivity.
Yes.
So when God makes a command, a moral command, that moral command provides the foundation for why that moral is objective. Now, this doesn't mean you have to believe in God in order to understand what morality is. It doesn't mean you have to believe in God in order to appreciate that some things are objective or not. What we're saying is, if this moral is objective, if something is morally evil or morally good, objectively, in the way that we just described, then that necessitates God's existence. Because there is no other rational foundation.
That's very powerful.
I'll give you an example. There are a few alternatives. The main alternatives. Biology, right? Social pressure. Those are the two main alternatives outside of God to try and provide a foundation for objective morals. Now, if I were to say to you, say I was an atheist or a skeptic, I'd be like, I really appreciate what you're saying. I understand that, things are objectively morally wrong. but I can ground this understanding of objective morals based upon biology. What would you say, bro?
Well, straight away it doesn't add up because biology is something that's ever evolving. The whole idea is everything about you is evolving and changing to suit survival and reproduction.
Absolutely.
Right? So I'm thinking now, and I'm sure everyone else watching this is thinking as well. Well, if that's the case, then even our thought processes are geared towards survival and reproduction, and therefore they will be constantly changing and evolving to meet that purpose.
Okay, that's excellent. Right? So just to summarize what you said, biology can't provide a foundation for objective morals.
No,
we're not saying it can't provide a foundation for having the capacity to formulate ethical rules.
Yes.
That's fine. But it can't provide a foundation for objective morals. Why? Because it's inevitably changing, right?
Yep.
So therefore it's subject to those biological changes. Therefore it can't provide a foundation for objective morals. The other point is, I want to raise what actually Charles Darwin said, bro. Charles Darwin made a phenomenal point. He said, and he did say it was an extreme example, but we could work with his thought experiment. He said, if we were reared under precisely the same conditions as the hive bees, we would think it was okay to rape to kill our fertile daughters. Now, if you extend this to wider examples, if we were reared under precisely the same biological conditions as the nurse shark, we would think it's okay to rape our women. Because that's what the nurse shark does. According to National Geographic, the nurse shark basically bites the fin of its mate and wrestles with its mate before it mates, right? So, just understanding this thought experiment, it actually devalues morality because it actually loses its meaning as well, what it means to be moral. Because if what it means to be moral is just a result of social biological conditioning, then what is morality, right? And also it can't be objective because it's subject to those inevitable changes. Now, one would argue though, bro, what about natural selection? Natural selection can give us the foundation for objective morals. Well, I would say no. Just like what the moral philosopher and ethicist said, Philip Kitcher, he said, natural selection, all it does, it gives you the capacity to formulate ethical rules. It doesn't give you the foundation. It doesn't ground that moral that we said that was outside of our limited human emotions and limited mind. It doesn't ground that objectively, right? So that's biology. Now, if I were to ask you, okay, fair enough, it's not biology.
Yep.
Say I'm a humanist, and I said, well, I'm a humanist. I think if human beings come together, if rational, sane human beings come together, progressive human beings come together, will form a consensus, and our consensus by human beings coming together will be able to ground morals and make them objective. What would you say?
You still run into the same problem, right? Because then it's just the societies as a whole's idea of what right and wrong is. It's still their subjective opinion, a collective subjective opinion, but it's nevertheless a subjective opinion of society. It's still within them as a human being, right?
Yes.
So that's a problem in itself, right?
Of course.
And then you can have 2 or 3 different societies from different parts of the world discussing one issue, and they can have their own subjective opinions regarding that issue.
Absolutely.
And they will believe they're right in their own situations and positions.
Yeah.
So there's nothing objective about it anyway. Who's right out of all 3 then, or 4 or 5?
Exactly. So just to break it down, society is based on individual subjective human beings. One subjective human being plus another subjective human being, you're still going to get something subjective.
Yeah.
Not only that, societies are known to change.
Yes.
If you look at the history of societies, you see that they change. And there have been times in history where you have groups of people coming together to actually agree on something that is actually immoral.
Wow.
And that's the problem. Now, you could refer to things like Nazi Germany. There was some form of consensus.
Yes.
Even if you go slightly towards the east, if you like, again, there is some form of consensus. Many people would be like, no, that's not a moral thing to do. So, social consensus is a problem because it changes and it doesn't have that objective feel about it, and therefore it can't make morals objective because you're not transcending human subjectivity. So from that point of view, we're in a sticky wicket. We have a bit of a problem, and the problem is if biology can't provide a foundation for objective morals, if social pressure can't provide a foundation for objective morals, then where do we go? And we're not squeezing God in there just because we want to. We're saying, well, since it is objective, these morals, and we believe these morals are objective because we gave the example of killing the innocent child, and we know that objective means outside of the limited mind and the limited human emotions, then it does require some grounding. Now, what best grounds that objectively? Well, the only foundation in grounding is what? Allah, God.
Absolutely.
Now, there are a few issues with this, though. You have the famous contention which is called Euthyphro's dilemma, Plato's dilemma. And it's a typical response. You find this response, for example, in popular atheist literature. You have Alom Shah's book. It's called The Young Atheist Handbook, and he mentions this. Is it good because the commands of God are good, or is it good because I forgot the dilemma now. How does it go? Is it good because
God's commands are good?
Because God's commands are good, or is it good because what God commands is good? Is that the same thing? I might have to Google it now. I even wrote about this in my book. Okay, is it
good because God said so?
Yeah.
Or is it good because
what God said is good?
Yeah,
okay,
so
good.
Is God
brilliant.
Limited to goodness and he can't escape it? I think that's
absolutely. So here's the dilemma.
Yeah.
So is it good because God said it, God commanded it?
Yeah.
Or is it good because his commands are good?
Yeah.
So this is a dilemma. So if you go with the first part of the dilemma, it's good because God said so, then one would argue morality becomes quite arbitrary.
So God changes.
Yeah, God could change his mind. God could basically say, you should kill all 5-year-olds. And just because he said it, then it becomes objectively good.
Yeah.
And that there's nothing within us that already recognizes objective good. And that's the problem. So if you go with the first part of that dilemma, saying, well, what God says is good, well, the problem here is that it becomes so arbitrary that God can command anything, and not only that, we should not have anything within us that actually recognize objective goodness because it's arbitrary and God could say whatever he wants kind of thing, right?
So what's the problem with the other?
Well, the problem with the other one is if what God commands is good, then that means you already know what good is and you're judging God's commands by an external good, external to God.
Yep.
So where do you go? This is a big dilemma. Now, traditionally, Muslims have always been divine command theorists. There is a middle way. And the middle way, just like Professor Akhtar said in his book, The Quran and the Secular Mind, A Philosophy of Islam, it's a really good book. He basically says, well, actually, there is a third way. It breaks the dilemma. And the third way is, God is good. And there's a subtlety here. And we know Allah's name is Al-Bab, which means the source of all goodness. He is good, therefore what he commands is a derivative of who he is, which is goodness. Now one would argue, well, why is God good? Well, God is good because he defines what good is, he's the source of all goodness. And the reason he defines what good is, because he's the only being worthy of worship, and conceptually the only being worthy of worship is the highest form of good. Right, the highest form of the highest source of goodness. So we break the dilemma that way.
Right. So that's
a bit deep, but
it is very deep.
The point is, from the point of view of the campaign, bro, you tell everybody. So what are we going to do on a practical level?
So one thing we've established from what you've discussed, although it was deep and quite technical maybe for many of us, right? However, you made a very powerful argument highlighting that if you want to know goodness in its true sense, from an objective perspective, it only makes sense through God. Right? Whether you're an atheist, whoever you are, you can deny God, but the fact that you believe in objective goodness is because God exists.
Absolutely.
You denying him, that's just your position. It doesn't mean God doesn't exist.
Sure.
Right? Now, I want to touch upon the other element of this campaign, bro. That simple, spiritual, innate, fitri element, which is just knowing our Creator. And as we get to know him and his names and we learn about him, how that impacts the human being and what we want to achieve through getting people to just know the Creator.
Well, I think you should start by saying, what is our tool for this campaign, bro?
Yes, so what we've done, and it was, may Allah bless whoever idea this was, it's a phenomenal idea. What we decided to do was, we want to introduce Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to humanity this Ramadan, right? And we know Ramadan is a month where we try to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we try to draw closer to him as Muslims. We fast during this month because Allah told us to fast and it aids in us to having taqwa. consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what we thought was, why not do a campaign, do dawah in this month, where there's so many rewards, and do this amazing act, the job of the prophets, but do it and inform humanity of the Creator through it, right? And the best way of doing that, we thought one way of doing that was to introduce Allah and His names, what Allah has told us about Himself.
Brilliant.
The names Allah has taught us.
So what did we
Himself.
develop?
So we developed a beautiful booklet,
Brilliant.
right, which I believe has 100 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah tells us in the Quran and the authentic hadith.
So what you're saying here is that we basically compiled all the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we know of.
Yeah, not all of them, but
The ones based on a prophetic tradition
Yeah.
and based on the Quran.
Yeah.
And we explained it in a way that was spiritual,
Yeah.
that a non-Muslim would understand.
Absolutely.
And what was our criteria for each name?
What was our criteria for each name? Did you have there was a criteria, but my brain's gone dead right now.
Sorry, the criteria was that when you read each name, it makes you want to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more.
Yes.
Okay? So for example, we discussed Allah's name Al-Wudud.
Yes.
He is the excessively loving.
Yeah.
The word Al-Wudud comes from the word wud, which means a loving that is giving. And we discussed, even in the book, and it's very short, it's like one paragraph
nice
with a
booklet.
verse or a hadith or a prophetic tradition. And when we talked about Allah's love, for example, we said Allah's love is the purest form of love, because He doesn't need to love, because He is Al-Ghani, He is independent, yet He loves. And His love even transcends a mother's love, which is one of the highest forms of worldly love, because a mother needs to love, it fulfills her. But Allah doesn't need to be fulfilled. He is Al-Ghani, the independent, yet He loves. And He gains nothing by loving. So imagine how pure His love is. Just knowing this conceptually, you would want to taste some of Allah's love. Do you see my point? So we've done that with all the names. So let me ask you a question. What's one of your favorite names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, apart from the one that we've just
One
mentioned?
came to mind was Al-Wali, the protective friend. Like, and if you think about this, we, as human beings, we have this loneliness inside of us. We want friends, right? We want to be around people. We want to associate with people. We want to have friends that we can rely upon, that can help us in need. But Allah tells us that He is the protective friend of those that believe the Quran.
SubhanAllah.
The creator of the heavens and the earth, who's above His throne, who's bigger than everything, the creator of all that exists. And this insignificant, these little creatures that are running around on this planet, this blue little dot, which is tiny in our own solar system compared to the other galaxies and so on and so forth, He tells these little creatures that He is their protective friend. He is taking care of. How? Just think, if you think about it, if you have Allah as a friend, you don't need anyone else.
And this is why, if you know Allah, you'll never be lonely. Because I remember I read a statement just a few days ago. It said, you're only lonely if you don't like the person you're with. So if you're alone by yourself and you're still lonely, you don't like yourself. But the believer, he understands that Allah is closer to him by His knowledge than his jugular vein. And if you know Allah, how could you ever be lonely? Because He is Al-Wali, the protective friend. Allahu Akbar. And Sabur was telling me just the other day about Ibrahim alayhi salam, that, you know, what comes to mind when you think about the story of Abraham? You think about sacrifice, you think about, you know, idol worship, skepticism, tawheed, calling people to the worship and love of Allah. And we're going all through these things, and he said, no, there's one more thing you're missing. I said, what? He said, loneliness. He was alone, calling people to Allah. He made the adhan, and no one was there. He was alone and left his family and sacrificed for Allah alone. And Allah calls him Khalil Allah, the friend of Allah. So that's just amazing. I mean, so brothers and sisters, this is exactly what we want you to start feeling. And what we want you to start feeling is that when you reflect on the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I am telling you, there is nothing but what's going to happen in your soul is that you want to know Allah more and you want to worship Him more. And even humanity would want to know Allah more and worship Him more. And I really believe just giving this booklet out to humanity, to our brothers and sisters in humanity, when they start understanding, wow, this is God? God is not a guy in the sky with a big white beard telling us what to do, but God is my loving friend. God is my protector. God is the wise. God is the source of goodness. God is the subtly kind. God is the knowing, God is the loving, He has special mercy for those who want to accept it. All of those things. Yeah, I want to know Allah. I want to know God, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is our duty as Muslims, is simply to be godly people and also to direct people to God. It's simple as that. Be a godly person, do God as they say, be a godly person, and direct people to this godliness. And
Sure.
that's what we're all about. This campaign is phenomenal. But just
Yes,
to
sir.
add, I do apologize,
Yeah.
forgot. Because some of the stuff that we mentioned was maybe slightly complicated,
Yep.
there's a website at the back. At the moment it's blank, but we're going to be filling it in with more information and more details about what we spoke about. And the website is, and you can share it with your non-Muslim friends and family and colleagues in the next few days. It's iera.org/God. iera.org/God. We're going to be talking about morality, about Allah's names, about the spiritual stuff, about the conceptual stuff. Simple, profound, is all there for you, and it's coming very soon. So, end it, bro.
Brothers and sisters, until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.